I can't feel my legs anymore. The mud is so thick it's like concrete around my boots, and the rain hasn't stopped for 6 days. 6 days of hell. 6 days watching good men die. I'm Private James Sullivan, 22 years old, from a small town in Montana where the biggest thing that ever happened was the 4th of July parade. And right now I'm lying in a crater that used to be a rice paddy, listening to screams I'll hear for the rest of my life. There are bodies everywhere. Not enemy bodies, our boys, Marines, brothers. I count them because that's all I can do now. That's all any of us can do. 12 near the tree line, 8 by the demolished bunker, 15 scattered across the field like broken dolls. The numbers keep climbing in my head. 30, 45, 60. I've stopped trying to remember their names because if I do, I'll lose my mind. My rifle is jammed with mud. My hands won't stop shaking. And the worst part, the part that makes me want to scream until my throat tears apart, is that this didn't have to happen. None of this had to happen. We walked right into it. Every single one of us knew something was wrong. We felt it in our guts. But orders are orders. And good Marines follow orders even when those orders are sending them straight to their deaths. I made a promise 6 hours ago, when the sun was still up and I could still see their faces. I made a promise to Bobby Martinez from Texas while I held pressure on the hole in his chest and watched the light fade from his eyes. I promised him I would remember. I would remember every single one of them. And now, as the count reaches 94, 95, 96, I know that promise is going to destroy me, because how do you carry 102 ghosts on your back for the rest of your life? How do you wake up every morning knowing you survived and they didn't? If my story resonates with you, please hit the like button to bring a little light to this father's heart. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss my upcoming life stories, and tell me in the comments where you're watching this video from and what time it is there right now. It makes me so happy to know what corner of the country or world you're listening from. They called it Operation Buffalo. Sounds noble, doesn't it? Powerful. American. But there was nothing noble about what happened on July 2nd, 1967, in the hills near Con Thien, right at the edge of the demilitarized zone in Vietnam. I was just a kid from Montana who'd never seen an ocean before boot camp, who'd never fired a weapon in anger, who thought war was something that happened in movies. My mum cried when I enlisted. My dad shook my hand and told me to make him proud. I wonder if he's proud now. I wonder if any of this made anyone proud. We were part of the 1st Battalion, 9th Marines, the Walking Dead they called us, because we'd been through so much already. But nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared us for what was waiting in those hills. The brass told us it would be a routine patrol. Routine. That word should be banned from the military vocabulary because it's always a lie. They said we'd sweep the area, check for enemy activity, and be back by nightfall. 127 of us headed out that morning. Only 25 of us came back, and I'm still not sure if coming back was a blessing or a curse. They grew up in a town called Whitefish, Montana, population 3,000 on a good day. My dad worked at the lumber mill. My mum was a school teacher. We had 1 stoplight, 2 churches, and everyone knew everyone's business. Life was simple, predictable, safe. I was the first person in my family to graduate high school. The recruiter came through town in the fall of 1965, all shiny buttons and promises of adventure, education benefits, and serving my country. I was 18 and stupid enough to believe him. Basic training at Paris Island broke me down and built me back up into something I didn't recognize. They taught me how to kill efficiently, how to follow orders without question, how to be a weapon, but they never taught me how to live with what I'd become. I arrived in Vietnam in March of 1967. The heat hit me like a physical force when I stepped off that transport plane. It wasn't just hot. It was oppressive, suffocating, alive. The jungle was like nothing I'd ever seen. Everything was wet, rotting, crawling with things that bit and stung and infected. Within a week, half my platoon had some kind of rash or foot rot or dysentery. Welcome to paradise, the old-timers said. You'll miss it when you're gone. I thought they were insane. My unit, Lima Company, had been in country for 8 months when I joined them. They'd already lost 30% of their original members. The faces were young, but the eyes were old, ancient. These guys had seen things that hollowed them out from the inside. There was Tommy Henderson from Alabama, built like a linebacker and gentle as a lamb until the shooting started. Carlos Ramirez from Los Angeles, who could quote poetry and field strip an M16 blindfolded. William Red O'Connor from Boston, with hair like fire and a laugh that could lift everyone's spirits even in the darkest moments. And Bobby Martinez from El Paso, my best friend from boot camp, the guy who'd gotten me through the worst days, who'd promised we'd make it home together and start a business, maybe a garage or a bar. Something simple where we could work with our hands and forget all this. The North Vietnamese Army, the NVA, had been building up forces near the DMZ for months. Intelligence reports talked about entire regiments moving south, preparing for something big. Con Thien was a strategic position, a hill that overlooked the entire area. If the enemy took it, they'd have a clear path south. So we were sent to defend it, to patrol the surrounding area, to be the eyes and ears of the Marine Corps. What nobody told us was that we were also the bait. July 1st, 1967. We got orders for Operation Buffalo, a simple sweep and clear mission north of Con Thien. The briefing was quick, almost casual. Enemy activity in the area had been light. A few snipers, some scattered patrols. Nothing we couldn't handle. Captain Walters, our company commander, seemed confident. Maybe too confident. I remember looking at Bobby during the briefing, and he looked back at me with this expression I couldn't quite read. Later, he told me his grandmother had appeared in his dream the night before, telling him to be careful, that death was walking close. I laughed it off. I wish I hadn't. We moved out at dawn on July 2nd, 127 Marines, stretched out in a long column, winding through hills that were eerily quiet. Too quiet. Even the birds weren't singing. The jungle had this way of talking to you if you listened. It would tell you when something was wrong. Every veteran knew this. And that morning, the jungle was screaming warnings that we all heard, but nobody wanted to acknowledge. Because if we acknowledged it, if we said out loud that something felt wrong, we'd be questioning orders. And you didn't question orders. I was carrying the M60 machine gun that day, 60 pounds of steel and death that made my shoulders burn and my back ache. But I was young and strong, and I'd been chosen for this role because I'd proven I could stay calm under fire. The M60 was our heavy support, our big gun. When things went bad, I was supposed to lay down suppressive fire while others maneuvered. I'd trained for this. I was ready for this, or so I thought. 2 hours into the patrol, we reached a valley between two ridgelines, a natural corridor that funneled us into a narrow path. Textbook ambush terrain. Every one of us knew it. I could see the tension in everyone's shoulders, the way fingers moved closer to triggers, the way eyes scanned the tree line with increasing urgency. Captain Walters called a halt. He conferenced with the platoon leaders. We could hear the argument. Lieutenant Barnes wanted to bypass the valley, take the long route around. He said it stank of a trap. But the captain had his orders, and those orders said to sweep this specific grid coordinate. The discussion lasted maybe 5 minutes. Then we were moving again, down into the valley, into the funnel, into history. I remember thinking about my mom. It was random, the way thoughts come in moments of stress. I thought about her apple pie, the way she'd hum while she cooked, the way she'd kiss my forehead before bed even when I was 17 and too old for it. I thought about how much I wanted to taste that pie again, to hear that humming, to feel that kiss. I thought about how stupid it was that I might die without ever telling her how much those small things meant to me. The first shot came at 11:47 a.m. I know because I looked at my watch right before it happened, thinking about how much longer until we could take a break. One shot, from the ridge line to our left. It hit Private Daniels in the throat. He went down without a sound, just collapsed like someone had cut his strings. And then the world exploded. They'd set up a perfect L-shaped ambush. NVA regulars on 3 sides of us dug into positions they'd probably prepared weeks in advance. Heavy machine guns, mortars, rifles, RPGs, everything they had all at once, all concentrated on our single column of Marines trapped in that valley. The sound was indescribable. It wasn't individual shots. It was one continuous roar that obliterated thought, that turned the world into chaos and smoke and screaming metal. I hit the ground and started returning fire. The M60 kicked against my shoulder as I swept the tree line, Not really aiming, just putting rounds down range, trying to give the guys around me a chance to find cover. But there was no cover. The valley floor was mostly bare, just some scattered rocks and depression that barely qualified as concealment. We were completely exposed. Bobby was 5 yards to my left. I watched him crawl toward a small berm, dragging Private Wilson, who'd been hit in both legs. The determination on Bobby's face, the way he refused to leave Wilson behind even as bullets kicked up dirt all around them, that's what a hero looks like. Not the polished image from recruiting posters, but a terrified 20-year-old kid covered in mud and blood, doing what's right because it's right, even when it means he might die. The NVA had done their math. They'd counted our numbers. They'd chosen their killing ground perfectly, and they'd committed at least 2 full companies to this ambush, maybe 400 soldiers against our 127. The odds were mathematical certainty. We were going to die here. All of us. It was just a question of how long we could hold out and how many we could take with us. Captain Walters was on the radio, screaming for air support, for artillery, for anything. But the weather had turned. Clouds had rolled in, low and thick. The jets couldn't get to us through the ceiling. The artillery couldn't see to shoot without risk of hitting us. We were alone. Completely, utterly alone. Red O'Connor made it to my position, sliding in beside me as I changed the barrel on the M60. It had gotten so hot it was glowing. He had blood running down his face from a shrapnel wound, but he was grinning. Actually grinning. "Well, Sullivan," he said, his Boston accent thick even now, "this is a right proper mess we're in." And then he started feeding me ammo, calm as if we were at the range while hell itself raged around us. The fight lasted 7 hours. 7 hours of continuous combat. That might not sound like much, but let me tell you what 7 hours of combat feels like. It feels like 7 years. Every second stretches into eternity. Your heart pounds so hard you think it'll burst. Your hands move on autopilot while your mind tries to process the impossible. You see things that don't make sense. A man's body doing things bodies shouldn't do. Physics operating in ways that defy reality. You smell things you'll never be able to describe. Burning flesh, cordite, human waste, the peculiar metallic scent of massive amounts of blood. You hear sounds that will echo in your head forever. The screams, oh God, the screams of grown men crying for their mothers, begging for help that won't come, praying to gods who seem to have abandoned this valley. I watched Tommy Henderson get hit by an RPG. 1 second he was there, returning fire with his rifle, and the next second he just wasn't. He didn't die. He simply ceased to exist in any recognizable form. How do you process that? How do you continue functioning when your brain is trying to understand something so fundamentally wrong? Carlos Ramirez took a round through the jaw. I watched him try to talk, try to call for a corpsman, but all that came out was blood and broken sounds. His eyes met mine across the 10 feet that separated us, and in those eyes I saw him realize he was dying. I saw him try to crawl toward me, seeking comfort or maybe just to not die alone. I tried to reach him. I swear to God I tried. But the fire was too intense, and before I could move, another burst caught him in the chest and he stopped moving. The corpsmen, those brave, crazy bastards, kept running into the open to drag wounded men to cover. Doc Jameson made 6 trips before a sniper's bullet found him. Doc Patterson kept working, even after he'd been shot twice, bandaging men with hands that shook from his own blood loss. When he finally collapsed, Corporal Davis took over the medical kit, despite having no training, just trying to stop the bleeding, any bleeding, because what else could we do? By mid-afternoon, our ammunition was running low. I'd gone through 1,200 rounds on the M60. We were stripping ammo from the dead, taking their grenades, their rifle magazines, anything we could use. I tried not to look at their faces as I did it. I tried to pretend they were just equipment, just supplies. But I knew every face. I'd eaten with these men, joked with them, shared cigarettes and stories and dreams of home. The NVA tried to overrun us 3 times. 3 times they came out of the tree line in human wave attacks, and 3 times we threw everything we had at them. They left their dead piled in front of our position, so many bodies that they formed a literal wall. The smell was unbearable. The sight was worse. But they kept coming, kept pressing, kept trying to finish what they'd started. Bobby was still alive, still fighting. He'd moved to a position about 15 yards away, rallying a group of Marines whose lieutenant had been killed. He was calling out targets, coordinating fire, doing the job that officers do even though he was just a lance corporal like me. Between volleys, he'd look over at me and nod. This little gesture that said, "We're still here, we're still fighting, we're going to make it." I wanted to believe him, I needed to believe him. Around 4 p.m. the rain started again. Not a drizzle, a deluge. The kind of tropical downpour that turns the world grey and reduces visibility to almost nothing. In some ways, this saved us. The NVA couldn't see to shoot accurately. Their attacks became less coordinated, but it also meant the wounded lying in the open were drowning in mud and water, too weak to lift their heads, and we couldn't reach them. I heard them dying. I heard them calling out names. Mothers, girlfriends, guard, anyone who might answer. I heard them realize that no one was coming. That this was it, that they were going to die in this forgotten valley, halfway around the world from everything they loved. And there was nothing, absolutely nothing I could do except keep shooting, keep the enemy back, and hope that somehow, some way, help would arrive. The artillery finally came at 5 p.m. Someone higher up the chain of command had decided that friendly fire casualties were acceptable if it meant saving whoever was left. The first rounds hit 200 yards north of our position, then 150, then 100. The ground shook with each impact. Shrapnel zinged overhead. We pressed ourselves into the earth and prayed that the math was right, that the artillery calculations were perfect, because any mistake would kill us just as dead as the NVA. But it worked. The barrage drove the enemy back, forced them to break contact. The shooting gradually decreased from a roar to sporadic fire, to finally, mercifully, silence. The kind of silence that rings in your ears after hours of noise. The kind of silence that feels wrong, because it should be filled with voices, with life. But instead it's filled with the soft sounds of men dying. That's when I started counting. I had to know. I needed to know. I moved through the position, checking each body, closing eyes that stared at nothing, collecting dog tags that clinked together like wind chimes. 12, 20, 35, 48. The numbers climbed. Each one was a name I knew, a face I'd seen at breakfast, a person with a family back home that didn't know yet that their world had just shattered. I found Red O'Connor near where we'd been fighting together. He'd taken a round to the head sometime in the last hour, so quick he probably never felt it. His hands were still gripping his rifle. I sat with him for a while, not saying anything, just being there because he shouldn't be alone. Because none of them should be alone. Bobby. I found Bobby at 6:30 p.m., just as the light was failing. He was leaning against a tree at the edge of our perimeter, his rifle across his lap, looking almost peaceful. For a second, I thought he was just resting. Then I saw the blood. So much blood. He'd been hit multiple times but had kept fighting, kept leading, kept being the Marine he'd promised to be. When had he been hit? How long had he hidden it? How long had he kept going on sheer will? I crawled to him, took his hand. It was already cold. His eyes were open, looking toward home, toward Texas, toward all the dreams we'd shared about opening that garage and living simple lives. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry, Bobby." And then I made him that promise. I promised I would remember. I would tell his story. I would tell all their stories. I wouldn't let them become just numbers in a casualty report. They were real. They mattered. Their lives meant something. The final count was 102. 102 Marines dead in a single afternoon. 25 survivors, most of them wounded. I wasn't hit. Not a scratch. Not a single piece of shrapnel found me in 7 hours of combat. How do you process that? How do you accept that you lived when men far better than you died? The helicopters came at dusk. Dust-offs to evacuate the wounded and eventually the dead. I helped load bodies onto the birds, stacking them like cordwood, because there was no other way to fit them all. Each one weighed on me, not physically, but in a way that made my soul feel crushed. I was 22 years old, and I'd just lived through something that would haunt me forever. The investigation came later. Questions about intelligence failures, about tactical decisions, about why a routine patrol had turned into a massacre. Captain Walters was quietly reassigned. Some officers got reprimands that disappeared from their records. But that didn't bring anyone back. It didn't undo what happened. It didn't make the nightmares stop. I spent another 8 months in Vietnam after that day. 8 months where I didn't care if I lived or died. 8 months where I took risks that should have killed me but didn't. I was looking for death, I think, because I felt guilty that I'd survived. Survivor's guilt, they call it now. Back then, we just called it the weight. When I finally rotated home in March of 1968, I landed at Travis Air Force Base in California. I was 23 years old. I'd left Montana as a boy and returned as whatever I'd become. My dad picked me up at the airport. He took one look at me and started crying. He said I had the same eyes his father had after World War I. Empty, haunted, old beyond their years. I tried to adjust to civilian life. I really did. I got a job at the lumber mill like my dad. I dated a girl from town. I went to church on Sundays and pretended everything was fine. But it wasn't fine. Every night I'd wake up screaming back in that valley, watching my friends die over and over. Every loud noise sent me diving for cover. Every crowded space made me scan for threats, for exits, for ambush positions. I started drinking to sleep. Then I was drinking to wake up. Then I was just drinking. My girlfriend left. My dad stopped asking me what was wrong because he knew I'd never tell him. How could I explain what I'd seen? How could I describe what it feels like to hold your best friend's cold hand and realize you couldn't save him? I visited Bobby's family in El Paso in 1970. His mother answered the door, and when she saw me, she knew who I was because Bobby had written about me in his letters. She invited me in, fed me tamales that Bobby had loved, and asked me to tell her about her son's last day. I sat at their kitchen table and lied. I told her he died instantly, that he didn't suffer, that he was a hero. All true things, in their way. But I couldn't tell her about the 7 hours of hell, about how I'd found him already cold, about how I'd promised him something I wasn't sure I could keep. She gave me a box of Bobby's things that the Marines had sent back, his letters, his photos, his dog tags. She said she wanted me to have them because Bobby would have wanted that. I've kept that box for 35 years now. Sometimes I open it and read his letters, his descriptions of home, his plans for the future, his faith that we'd make it through. And I cry. Even now, all these years later, I cry. I never did open that garage, never built that simple life Bobby and I had dreamed about. How could I? How could I live those dreams when he couldn't? For years, I punished myself by refusing to be happy, refusing to move forward, refusing to let go of that day in July when everything changed. It took me 15 years to start healing. 15 years before I could talk about Vietnam without feeling like I was drowning. I joined a veterans group, started meeting with other men who'd seen what I'd seen, who carried the same weight. Slowly, painfully, I learned that survivor's guilt was real, that it was okay to be alive, that honoring the dead meant living well, not dying slowly. I'm 57 years old now. I have a wife who's patient with my nightmares, 2 kids who know their dad is different, but love me anyway. I work as a counselor at the VA, helping younger veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan deal with their own demons. When they tell me their stories, I see the same eyes I saw in the mirror for decades, the hollow, haunted look of someone who's seen too much. Every July 2nd, I go to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in D.C. I find the panels where my brothers' names are carved. 102 names. I trace each one with my fingers, say each name out loud, remember each face. It takes hours. People watch me, this older guy talking to a wall, crying openly. I don't care. This is my promise. This is how I remember. I've told their stories to anyone who'll listen. To my kids, to my counseling groups, to high school classes studying Vietnam. I've written letters to their families, some who remember me, some who don't. I've attended reunions with the 25 survivors, watching as we slowly dwindle. Cancer, heart attacks, suicide, taking us one by one, until soon there'll be no one left who remembers what happened in that valley. But I'll remember. Even when the others are gone, even when I'm the last one, I'll remember. Because I promised Bobby. I promised them all. Their lives mattered. Their sacrifice was real. They were sons and brothers and friends and fathers-to-be. They had dreams and fears and loves and hopes. They weren't just numbers in a history book, they were real. The lesson I learned in that valley isn't about war or heroism or any of the things they teach you in training. It's simpler than that. It's that every single life is precious. Every single person matters. And when we send our young people to fight, we need to be damn sure it's worth the cost, because that cost is measured in destroyed families, in childhood stolen, in futures erased. 102 brothers lost in a single battle. I carry them with me every day. They're in every breath I take, every sunrise I see, every moment of peace I experience. They're the voices in my head telling me to live well, to love deeply, to never waste the gift they gave me, the gift of life. I survived when they didn't, and I'll spend every remaining day trying to be worthy of that impossible, terrible, beautiful gift. If I could tell you one thing, it's this: never forget that every soldier, every veteran, every person in uniform carries stories like mine. We carry the weight of the ones who didn't come home. We carry the memories that don't fade. We carry the promise to remember. And we need you to help us carry that weight, to listen to our stories, to understand that war's true cost isn't measured in dollars or territory. It's measured in the ghosts that follow us home and the brothers we left behind in places the world has forgotten. I will always remember. That's my promise, that's my burden, that's my honor.